Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Raise Your Hand Live. My name is Asimawu Tahiru, a GP youth leader from the Northern Ghana. I'm so excited today. I have with me two great icons and well-experienced guests who are working on issues I'm very much passionate about: gender and education. These guests have contributed greatly to gender equality, youth development, access to quality education, and many others. Today we have Maliha Khan, who is the President and CEO of Women Deliver, and Alicia Herbert, who is the Special UK Envoy for Gender Equality. A very big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today. This edition of Raise Your Hand Live will be focused on the upcoming Women Deliver Conference, which is the largest global equality convening and will be happening very soon from July 17th in Kigali. We are going to be discussing the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration to advance gender equality. We are going to begin our discussion with you, Alicia. Women Deliver Conference 2023 brings together stakeholders from various sectors on gender disparities. Given that educating school-age girls is the surest path to the future gender equality, how do we increase political will and financing for education so that it is treated with the same agency and relevance as other sectors?
Huge thanks for that question. It's absolutely delighted to be here. And as you've rightly said, one of the surest ways to gender equality is through girls' education. We know that girls' education is one of the most impactful investments that any country, any society can make. Yeah, a girl who is educated is less likely to die in childbirth. Her children are more likely to live longer and more likely to be healthier, for example. She'll make a contribution to her household, to her community, and to her broader society. So, hugely, hugely important for us to invest in the education of girls. Yet education, we know education is in crisis across the world. 9 out of 10 children in low and lower middle income countries still are not able to read a simple text by the age of 10. And indeed, the long tail of COVID, conflict, climate continue to threaten the gains in education. Increasing conservatism in some parts of the world, for example, are chipping away and eating away at of girls to education and indeed to rights of women and girls more broadly. But coming more directly to your question, despite that, we know that education across the world, despite the fact that we know it's an impactful investment and one of the best that we can make, it is in crisis globally, given what I've just said. And yet the global community still needs to grip this, truly to grip this. And the political will and financing are key to that. The encouraging signs, though, with respect to political will, for example, and increasing political will. For example, the UK is part of a coalition for foundational learning that includes the Gates Foundation, the World Bank, UNICEF, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the United States, the government of the United States. And we recently launched at the Transforming Education Summit last year, we launched a call to action around foundational learning. And since then, we've had about 26 countries that have signed up. We've got about 30 organizations across the world. So we're trying to kind of get a political momentum around foundational learning to regain the losses, for example, through COVID and otherwise. We've got the International Parliamentary Network on Education, IPNED, again, with 511 members across 61 countries, bringing parliamentarians together to focus on domestic financing for education, and including for girls, and as well on to focus on learning. So we know that there are early signs that political will is actually building, and those are just two examples of that. And on financing, given the gap, we've got a gap of about $200 billion in the education sector. And quite frankly, I don't think we can do that purely through aid. We need to do that, or aid in a traditional form, as it were. I think we need to get creative and innovative about how we actually fill that financing gap. And that's why, for example, with the Global Partnership for Education has got a multiplier program, bringing in additional resources. It's why, for example, as the British government, we support the International Financing Facility for Education. We support the Education Outcomes Fund. It's why in our own bilateral programs, we try to bring in resources from the private sector in order to build the skills and to educate poor and marginalized girls across the world. And what we are also seeing is new, innovative, exciting initiatives to deal with climate-related shocks and school closures as a result of climate-related shocks. And many times when we have climate-related shocks and schools close, girls are impacted. So thinking beforehand about what happens, anticipatory action beforehand in that particular context is hugely important. So exciting initiatives coming up with respect to financing as well. But there's so much more to be done, as you know. We're in the foothills of this journey, and I think we have to stay the course on this, because we know that skilled and educated young people, particularly young women, are so crucial to the development of our communities and our societies in order to build prosperous societies and to build stable societies as well. So that's what I would say with respect to your particular question.
You have raised some excellent points. In my work as a youth activist, I have been doing a lot of work with traditional leaders and other stakeholders to raise political will for girls' education at the community level. I empower these leaders on the need to champion girls' education, and it is amazing how these leaders embrace it. And I can testify that some of the chiefs are currently advocating for girls' education. So advocacy to build political will is very important. Over to you, Maliha. You have over 3 decades of leadership and expertise in gender equality. How can education sector work with other sectors to empower young women to overcome barriers they face to access quality education?
Thank you so much, Asimawu, and a pleasure to be here. Indeed, you know, I've been working for many, many years, both with around the education sector. Just before coming to Women Deliver, I was with the Malala Fund that works in many different countries, focusing on girls' education, as well as just focusing on other issues related to girls and women's, you know, empowerment. And you know, a few points to make around that. First of all, I think we have to, you know, when it comes to education, if we really want education to be a huge contributing factor to gender equality, which, as Alicia, you know, sort of highlighted, it is one of the most impactful things you can do, is that we really have to push for 2 things. One is allow a girl to complete 12 years of education. Let's not stop at primary education, because the 12 years of education is where the girl is then able to go through adolescence. And we know that there is a cliff. We've gotten pretty good at getting girls into primary school and staying for 3-4 years in primary school. But then the cliff happens right at the transition point between primary and secondary. And that is where we have to be incredibly vigilant and try to garner all the other sectors in how do we keep girls in school, keep them learning, because that prevents things like you know, early marriage, early childbirth, and allows a girl to spend enough time in education to then be in a position to make her own, or at least have a little bit more say in her own, you know, incredibly important life choices that are coming up very, very soon around marriage, around childbirth, around economic engagement, and so forth. So that's one point. How do we, you know, education should really be 12 years of education. And the other is that it should be about quality education. It's not just keeping a child sitting on seats in classrooms. And that's obviously, you know, for a few reasons. One is if you have quality education, then girls are much more equipped to then go on to being, you know, full contributing citizens and fully engaged in economic activities further on, which is a huge boost to gender equality. But 2, we also know that that one of the clearest indicators of when a girl is going to be pulled out of school is if she's not doing well in school. Parents very rightfully say, she's not learning anything. Why is she going to school? Why doesn't she just stay at home and help out in the household? And then we know, then again, the vicious cycle starts. So I think that's the first thing we really, really have to focus on, is 12 years of quality education. And of course, the second thing is that a girl is a whole. it's not just about a girl in school. It's not just about a girl's health system. It's not just about a girl as an economic player. It's about her whole self, right? So we have to then bring in, we are very sectored, you know, we work in education, or we work in health, or we work in agriculture, but a person individually is not, you know, doesn't live their life according to our silos and sectors. And so we have to treat the whole girl. We have to look at what is happening in her household and natal family. We have to look at what is happening in the broader context. Asimawu, you spoke very eloquently about the work that you're doing with traditional leaders. And so having that enabling, you know, context for the girl, so that she can stay in school, she can learn in school, and simple things like she's safe going to school and coming back from school. We often forget that aspect of it too, right? Which can be a real big hurdle for girls there. The last piece I'll say is we need to talk much more to girls themselves about what they want. We need to talk much more. We tend to ignore girls. They tend not to be present in many of these conversations. Even when we involve youth, it's often not girls, and particularly not adolescent girls. And so we really need to be focusing much more on having the discussions and being led by the people themselves, or at least proximate leaders like yourself, who are much closer to you know, the population that we're trying to reach, and can much better reflect their lived realities and their aspirations and how they would like to proceed forward. And just because you mentioned it, Asimawu, I'll just put a little plug in here that, you know, in 10 days, we're all gathering. I think all three of us are going to be in Kigali at Women Deliver. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do there at the conference is think about the entire life of the people that we're talking about, not break it down into sectors. Trying to place, you know, proximate leaders at the center of the discussion so they can be much more leading the conversations. And then people like Alicia and I, and you were very complimentary to our decades. You didn't have to quite mention how many decades, let me just say, but our decades of experience. But at the same time, to be honest, we need to take a back seat, and people like you need to be in the driving seat to really have those discussions.
Yes, that's so true. I have seen from my engagements at the community level that poverty is one of the biggest challenges affecting girls' education. Education sector also needs to work with business sectors to enable these girls get employment so that they can support themselves with their basic needs. Now back to you, Alicia. We know that young people have important role to play in driving meaningful change. How can youth contribute to advancing gender equality and can be engaged in discussing around gender and education?
Absolutely. You know, huge thanks for that question as well, Asimawu. So, you know, and just building on some of what Maliha has already said in response to her last question. Look, just stepping back from this a little bit, one of the fundamentals of any credible policy, of any credible program, of any credible project, is that it must include the voices and perspectives of the people who it's intended to benefit. Yeah. And in this case, if we are thinking about policies around gender equality, you know, increasing or moving towards gender equality, achieving gender equality, if we're thinking about policies and programs and strategies around girls' education, it must include girls. It must include the voices and perspectives of young women. And so for us, for example, in the British government, inclusion is a guiding principle for us in the work that we do. For us, it's a no-brainer. And we've seen it happen at various levels, for example. And that's why, for example, we support the Global Partnership for Education Youth Leaders Board. Yeah, we support the participation of people like you to put into a leadership position, to get your voice out there, get the perspectives into those policies and programs and the way in which we do things. Education Cannot Wait, another global fund, is also another platform in which young people are actively encouraged and engaged in the programming. And for me as well, on a personal level, and indeed in my professional capacity, you know, engaging, talking to, listening to young people, particularly young women, when I travel, be they scholars who are supported by the British government, those involved in the policies and programs that we're doing across the piece, in education, or indeed in other aspects of gender equality, those who are probably been married quite young, those who are, seeking their sexual, ensuring that their sexual reproductive rights are being realized, be it in stable environments or conflict-affected environments, for example. I make it part and parcel of what I do and the travel that I undertake, for example. And I do that because, as I said, I think that the credibility, well, certainly my personal credibility, my professional credibility, the credibility of the organization and this government that I work for is huge. It's contingent on that kind of engagement. And it's not just me. I encourage my colleagues to do so as well. So they also are out there engaging with young people, be it here in the UK from the diaspora communities, or indeed when they travel. So for us, for me, young people, including young women, they bring such powerful testimony about the challenges that they face, and indeed solutions as well, about how to move the needle, about how to move things forward. So that continual genuine, and it's got to be genuine, that continual genuine inclusion of young people and young women is so crucial, it's so important. And I think that we exclude those voices and we exclude those perspectives at our peril. As I said, it's a no-brainer. We must, ensure that we engage meaningfully with young people and young women across the board.
I completely agree, Alicia. As a young activist myself, I know that young people need information and skills and space to utilize their capabilities. As a GP youth leader, I have had access to a lot of capacity building opportunity that have increased my work skills and helped me to build my work in the advocacy sector. I have been an advocate for tax exemption on menstrual products over the years, and there has been an amazing feedback recently from the Speaker of Parliament in Ghana here. We know that young people can be effective champions of issues that affect them. One additional question to you, Maliha. Building political will at the highest level is critical to advancing gender equality. How can women deliver participants encourage world leaders to address critical challenges that keep us from achieving gender equality, specifically in and through education?
To me, I would switch one word there in the question that you asked, because you said, how can we encourage world leaders? And to me, world leaders are accountable because it's their responsibility to educate their citizens. It is the right of every citizen of every country in the world to receive an education, right? So there's no question about it. It's not a matter of encouragement. It's not a kind of question of nice to have. It's not a question of, well, if we feel like it, if they've taken on leadership role in a country, they are responsible to their citizens. And so to me, your question should have been, how do we at Women Deliver in that conference hold our leaders accountable to their responsibility to educate all their citizens, particularly girls? So that's my one caveat I'll start with there. So one of the things that we really try to do at Women Deliver is create a forum that is, that brings together, sort of leadership. So we have several heads of state and heads of government coming, but most importantly, we have almost 40 ministers coming, and we know that decisions are made at a ministerial level. We have loads of parliamentarians coming because it's the parliaments that then put pressure on existing governments to put policies and legislations in place. And we have many bilateral agencies. So Alicia is coming, heading the FCDO delegation, but we have many others like that. We also have a lot of the sort of key multilateral and bilateral agencies also coming. So for instance, we have UN Women and UNFPA. GPE is coming there in a big way and holding many discussions, etc. But most of all, and most importantly, we have a huge contingent of civil society, activists and feminist leaders, particularly youth leaders, who are coming. And so to me, it is this sort of multi-sectoral, multi-level, transnational engagement where everyone is sitting down and saying, how can we do a few things? One, how can we get to know each other so that we can move in solidarity and partnership? We are way too often adversarial to each other. And this is a moment where we can, it's human nature. When you meet each other face to face, you get to know each other, you sit down and you have a cup of tea and coffee together. That's when you start to really move things forward and you have discussions that get accelerated hugely. So that's the first important thing. The second is to have hard conversations, right? Let's talk about the issues. What is being done? What is not being done? Women Deliver is not a conference where everybody stands up, makes a speech, and gets a pat on the back about how great they've been, right? No one gets to do that except at the opening ceremony. More of that later. But anyway, no one gets to do that. So everyone has to sit down and talk about content, talk about the issues, talk about, what we need to do to actually move forward so that we can all have a common narrative and some common objectives as a movement. 6,300 of us there in that space, but then the hundreds of thousands and millions of people whose networks we represent, who will then be able to move some of these things forward. And I think it's really, really important that we do that in a way that is not only holding the sort of leaders that I spoke about earlier accountable, but also holding each other accountable. I'm accountable, Alicia is accountable, and you as a leader, you are also accountable because you've taken on a leadership role. Right? So you have a whole constituency behind you that you have to then respond to and say, what did I do and how did I respond to your priorities and requests, and what did I do to make your life better and move things forward? So I think that having that political will is incredibly important. Having this moment of being able to create that solidarity where there is enough trust so that we know we can actually have those hard conversations and be truthful, not be performative, not be defensive, but be truthful and say, look, we were able to do this, we weren't able to do this, and how can we move forward together? And the last piece on that I'll say is I think, the political will is incredibly important. We too often keep talking about what is the solution for this or what's the solution for that. The solution for everything is political will, both capital P, political as in governments and legislation, but also in our societies and in our homes and in ourselves, being willing to change things, being willing to take that risk. We have the technical solutions for everything. We know how to educate a child. We know how to get a girl in school. We know how to give her a good education. We know how to prepare her as a full citizen. We know how to make her a complete and contributing economic citizen and engaged citizen of a country, right? So there's no technical solution. There's no ed tech, solution or anything else that we need to have in order to be able to do this. It is the will to get each girl in school, keep her in school, give her a quality education, and empower her to be the citizen she needs to be.
Excellent. So this is just a follow-up with the points you raised. So I want to find out, don't you think that we as individuals, especially participants from the Women Deliver Conference, need to account ourselves? Because not everyone will have the opportunity to attend this conference. And how are we going to share this information? So I was thinking, don't we have, are we not accountable for that?
Indeed, we are. And not only to share the information, but to think about the commitments we're making, whether they be big commitments. I'm sure Alicia will think of some really big commitments to make on behalf of the UK government, or that Women Deliver does in that. But to think of all the small commitments, the networks we're taking forward, and I really appreciate what you said about knowing that we are some of the privileged few who are able to get there, and there's so many others who are not. And then how do we fulfill our commitments to all of them?
Great, excellent. Thank you both for this amazing conversation. To end this discussion, I would like to ask for any final reflection. Specifically, what do you hope to see coming out of the Women Deliver 2023? Over to you, Alicia.
Thank you very much for that, Asimawu. So look, just before we joined and started the live broadcast of this call, I was recalling, and so was Maliha, about our very first women's conference that we attended when we were young women, and how empowering.
This is actually my first time.
Well, you know what I mean? Yeah, and I hope for you it will be as defining as it was for me. You know, just the power and the strength and the confidence that I drew from having, you know, such accomplished women and accomplished at all levels, internationally, at their national level, at the community level, was hugely, hugely empowering. So for me, at a minimum, I'm hoping, Maliha said about a quarter of the participants will be under the age of 30. At a minimum, I'm hoping that from this conference, you'll be able to draw that strength, that confidence, and indeed, it will help to kind of propel them forward. Because in fact, as you asked me in one of my questions, that's who's got to take this forward. Yeah, that they've got to act. They're the ones to do that. So at a minimum, you know, I'm hoping that is what will happen. And of course, I could talk about lots of other things about what my government will do and what we will, you know, what we hope to achieve out of it. But quite frankly, I think that will be such an incredible outcome, because that's the future and that's where we need to invest. Thanks.
Each and every participant feels that it's their space and it's their conference. We at Women Deliver are but the curators of this space. And we really hope that people see the utility of what they want to do and what they want to achieve from it.
Thank you so much to our amazing guest speakers. It is an honor having you to join us today. And you have made an excellent key point and how important it is for education sector to work together with other sectors and make real and lasting change for girls. I will also be at the Women Deliver Conference as a GP youth leader, and I look forward to engaging you there.
Just to echo that, huge thanks for Asimawu, as well as to GPE for this opportunity and for, you know, what has been quite an inspiring conversation, and look forward to meeting her in person and indeed others at Women Deliver in just a week's time. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to thank you, Asimawu, and also thanks to GPE for this great opportunity. And I look forward to welcoming everybody to Kigali.
Thank you also to my listeners. Bye.